The next kind of test is what we called an adverb test. We can illustrate how the test works by considering where a model adverb, such as possibly, perhaps, maybe, probably, conceivably, definitely, or certainly, can be positioned. A key assumption underlying this test is that adverbs are subject to the following adverb condition. Note, this is important to remember that only a string of words, which is a constituent, can be modified by an adverb. So we have sentences below. We have 4 sentences, and I'm going to read it to you. Perhaps the chairman has resigned from the board. The chairman definitely has resigned from the board. The chairman has certainly resigned from the board. The probably chairman has resigned from the board. Given the fact that the string, the chairman, has resigned from the board in sentence A can be modified by perhaps is constituent with the claim that the relevant string is a tense phrase constituent. Likewise, the fact that the string has resigned from the board in sentence B can be modified by definitely is constituent with the claim that it is a T-bar constituent. And similarly, the fact that resigned from the board can be modified by certainly in sentence C provides evidence in support of the claim made that it is a verb phrase constituent. By contrast, the impossibility of using the adverb probably to modify the string chairman has resigned from the board in sentence D provides evidence in support of the claim made that the relevant string is not a constituent of any kind. Now let's go ahead and talk about substitution test. This is another testing procedure. So what is it? It's a testing whether the relevant string can be substituted by a single word. I'm going to give you 4 examples here, 4 sentences. The chairman has resigned from the board and he is now living in utopia. The press say that the chairman has resigned from the board and so he has... If the managing director says the chairman has resigned from the board, he must have done. If the chairman has resigned from the board, which you say he has, now has, how come his car is still in the company car park? So as you can see here, there is a percentage sign. Okay, so what does it mean? The percentage sign in front of sentence C indicates that this structure is only found in certain varieties of English, notably British English. In the above sentences, the underlined string can be replaced to by proof form. A proof form is a word that can stand in place of some other expression. As you can see here, if we're going to go back there, these can be replaced by proof form. Okay. The next kind of test is what we call the fragment test. The premise of this test is that there are on the top can be used examples. What are those sentence fragments, by the way? Those are expressions, complete sentences, which can be used as like in answer to a question. Now consider the mini dialogue below. So we have speaker A. What has the chairman done? Speaker B. Resigned from the board. Has resigned from the board. As you can see, the string resigned from the board can be used as a sentence fragment because it is a verb phrase. And hence the maximal projection of the resign. But would it be that the string has resigned from the board can be applied to speaker A's question. The answer would seem to lie in the conditions such as fragment condition. Fragment condition. Fragment condition is when only a maximal projection serves as a sentence fragment. We can then say that the reason why the determiner phrase the board, the prepositional phrase from the board, and the verb phrase resigned from the board can be used as sentence fragments is that each of these expressions is a maximal projection. What does it mean, maximal projection? It is an expression which does not project into a larger expression with the same head. Conversely, the reason why has resigned from the board cannot serve as a sentence fragment is that it is an intermediate T-bar projection of the T auxiliary has, the corresponding maximal projection being the complete tense phrase constituent he has resigned from the board. Now, the next type of testing is what Radford called the omission or deletion test. It is involving omission or deletion of redundant information in a sentence. Examples, information which has been mentioned in the preceding discourse or which can be inferred from the context. So here I'm going to show you 3 sentences, sample sentences that he wrote from his book. So here he gave examples as he can speak French better than she can speak German. He can speak French better than she can speak German. He can speak French better than she can speak German. As you can see, these are being struck through. Now, what does it mean? In sentence A, the head verb speak of the verb phrase speak German is omitted, leaving a gap in the middle of the verb phrase where the verb speak would otherwise have been. For obvious reason, this phenomenon is referred to as gapping. In sentence B, both the head T constituent can of the tense phrase she can speak German and the head verb constituent speak of the verb phrase speak German undergo gapping, resulting in a somewhat cryptic sentence. So this sentence involves multiple gapping. By contrast, in sentence C, the whole verb phrase speak German is omitted, a phenomenon termed verb phrase ellipsis, since this verb phrase is the maximal projection of the verb speak. Sentence C is consistent with the condition ellipsis condition, where only maximal projections can undergo ellipsis. Okay, now the next kind of test is what Radford called focus test. Now, what is this focus test? This is to occupy the focus position within the structure. Focusing is generally assumed to be the subject to a focus condition where only a maximal projection can be focused in a cleft or pseudo-cleft sentence. I'm going to give you sets of sentences. So set 1, sentence A, it is a board that the chairman has signed. Sentence B is from the chairman signed. Sentence C from the C. What the board. B, chairman has board. C, what the chair does sign or resign from the board. Now let's take a look at Radford's analysis of these sets of sentences. The fact that the string, the board, can be focused in both a cleft sentence, such as sentence A, and a pseudo or pseudo-cleft sentence, such as sentence A, is a determiner phrase, and hence a maximal projection. Likewise, the fact that the string from the board can be focused in the cleft sentence, sentence A, is a prepositional phrase constituent, and hence also a maximal projection. Finally, the fact that the verb phrase resigned or resigned from the board can be focused in a pseudo-cleft sentence, such as sentence C, that resigned from the board is a verb phrase constituent, and so also a maximal projection. So for those who doesn't know the difference between the cleft sentence and the pseudo-cleft sentences, I attached here the meaning of those. Cleft sentence is a sentence in which an element is emphasized by being put in a separate clause with the use of an empty introductory word such as it or that. Example, it's money we want. It was today that I saw him. That was the king who we're talking to. While the pseudo-cleft sentences, also called WH clefts, are similar in function to cleft sentences, but they're formed with the pronoun what, okay, such as that and or which. The emphasis in a pseudo-cleft sentence is on the phrase after the W clause or what clause plus be. What you need is a good sleep, for example. But why sentence like sentence C and B be ungrammatical? The reason for technicality sentence C would be that only very restricted types of maxims in more specifically pronominal or structures. The reason for ungrammaticality of sentence B lies not what is but like the structure or the structure is ungrammatical. Let's go to the next part of my report, which is the syntactic relations, minimalist approach. So to Andrew Radford, phrases are formed a series of binary operations and the resultant of tree diagrams because they mark that other phrases of various types. The tree referred to in an earlier technical work, pacemakers, or abbreviated to P-makers. They use phrases, hence a tree diagram provides a visualization structure of the correct. So he continued that each node in the tree, what does it mean, tree, for those who doesn't know? Okay, each point in the tree which carries a category label like noun, verb, etc., represent a different constituent of the sentence. Hence, there are as many different constituents in any given phrase marker as there are nodes carrying category labels. Nodes at the very bottom of the tree are called terminal nodes, and other nodes are non-terminal nodes. So, for example, all the D determiners, nouns, tense, verbs, and P nodes are prepositional nodes in our terminal nodes, and all the determiner phrase, prepositional phrase, verb phrase, T-bar, and tense phrase nodes are non-terminal nodes. The topmost node in any tree is said to be its roots. Each terminal node in the tree carries a single lexical item. So what does it mean, single lexical item? It's an item from the lexicon or dictionary, like dog or go, etc. Lexical items are a set of phonological, semantic, and grammatical properties or features with category labels like noun, verb, T, and C, etc., being used as shorthand abbreviation for the set of grammatical features carried by the relevant items. Now, it is useful to develop a G to describe this syntactic concepts, since central to syntactic description. Essentially, a phrase marker is a graph comprising a set of points, quarter labeled nodes connected by branches, quartered solid lines, representing containment relations. Okay, so what does it mean, containment relations? Telling us which constituents contain or are contained within which other constituents. So we can illustrate what this means in terms of the following abstract tree structure, where A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and J are different nodes in the tree representing different constituents. Now, what is this illustration telling us? G immediately contains H and J, and conversely, H and J are the two constituents immediately contained within G, and hence are the two immediate constituents of G. This is shown by the fact that H and J are the two nodes immediately beneath G, which are connected to G by a branch solid line. Likewise, E immediately contains F and G, B immediately contains C and D, and A immediately contains B and E. We can also say that E contains F, G, H, and J, and that A contains B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and J. And likewise that G contains H and J, and B contains C and D. Using equivalent kinship terminology, we can say that A is the mother of B and E, and conversely B and E are the two daughters of A. B is the mother of C and D, E is the mother of E, F and G is the mother of H and J. Likewise, B and E are sisters by virtue of both being daughters of A, as are C and D, F and G, and H and J. Now, a particularly important syntactic relation is C command. It is a conventional abbreviation of constituent command. So what is this then? A C command provides us with a useful way of determining the relative position of two different constituents within the same tree, in particular, whether one is lower in the tree than the other or not. Now let's take a look at this illustration once again. Okay, in the light of the definition of C command, let's consider which constituents each of the nodes in the above illustration C commands. So A doesn't C command any of the other nodes, since A has no sister. B C commands E, F, G, H, and J because B's sister is E, and E contains F, G, H, and J. C commands only D because C's sister is D, and D does not contain any other constituent. Likewise, C commands only C. C commands B, C, and D because B is a sister of E and B. Sister of E, and B contains C and D. C commands G, H, and J because G is the sister of F, and G contains H and J. C commands only F because G's sister is F, and F does not contain any other constituents. H and J likewise C command each other, or only each other, because they're sisters which have no daughters of their own. Now we can illustrate the importance of the C command relation in syntactic description by looking at the distribution of the class of expressions which are known as polarity expressions. These are expressions which have an inherent polarity in the sense that They're restricted to occurring in certain types of sentence. In this connection, consider the quantifier any in English and its compounds like anymore, anyone, anything, anywhere, etc. Any, it has two different uses. One is as a universal or free choice quantifier with a meaning similar to every, as in you can have any cake you like. In this use, the initial A of any is stressed, and the relevant word is not a polarity. The second use of any is as a partitive or existential quantifier. In this use, it has a meaning similar to some and be unstressed, with its initial value reduced to schwa or even being truncated in rapid colloquial speech styles. Example, you wouldn't help me. In this second use, it is indeed a polarity item. Now, what does it mean, polarity condition? Polarity expression must be C commanded by an effective constituent. What's an effective? Examples are negative, interrogative, or conditional. To see how this works, consider whether the polarity item or item anything satisfies the polarity condition in a structure such as the following. The fact that he hasn't resigned change anything. Now consider first of all whether the pronoun anything is C commanded by tense auxiliary will or won't. Since the sister of will won't is the verb phrase change anything, and since anything is one of the constituent verb phrase, it allows that will won't does indeed C command pronoun anything under the definition of C command. What this means is that using the negative auxiliary won't will satisfy the polarity condition, so correctly predicting that the corresponding sentence below is grammatical. The sentence, the fact that he hasn't resigned won't change anything. But now consider whether pronoun anything is C commanded by T auxiliary hasn't. The sister of hasn't is the verb constituent resigned, and it is clear that anything is not a constituent of the verb resigned, and hence that hasn't does not C command anything. Therefore, correctly predicts the ungrammaticality of a sentence such as the following. The fact that he hasn't resigned will change anything. Now, a second class of expressions whose distribution can be given a principled characterization in terms of relation C command are so-called anaphors. These include reflexives. What are reflexives? These are self or selves forms like myself, yourself, themselves, etc., and reciprocals like each other and one another. Such anaphors have the property that they cannot be used to refer directly to an entity in the outside world, but rather must take the reference from an antecedent elsewhere in the same phrase or sentence. Now we have to take note. Where an anaphor has no suitable antecedent to bind it, the resulting structure is ungrammatical, as we see from contrasts such as that below. He must feel proud of himself. She must feel proud of himself. Himself must feel proud of you. In sentence A, the third person masculine singular anaphor himself is bound by a suitable third person masculine singular antecedent he, with the result that sentence A is grammatical, but sentence B himself has no suitable antecedent. The feminine pronoun she isn't a suitable antecedent for the masculine anaphor himself, and so is unbound, with the result that sentence B is ill-formed. And in sentence C, there is no antecedent of any kind for the anaphor himself, with the result that the anaphor is again unbound, and the sentence is ill-formed. Now we also have the binding condition. What is this binding condition? A bound constituent must be C commanded by an appropriate antecedent. So this is how it looks like. The precedent may blame himself. Okay, this is spread it out from Radford's analysis. So the reflexive pronoun himself can be bound by the determiner phrase, the precedent, because the sister of the determinant phrase node is the T-bar node, and the pronoun himself is one of the constituent of the relevant T-bar node. Consequently, the determiner phrase, the precedent, C commands the anaphor himself, and the binding condition is satisfied. We can therefore correctly specify that the precedent may blame himself is grammatical, with the precedent interpreted as the antecedent of himself. Okay, but now consider why a structure like the sentence above isn't grammatical. The answer is that the determiner phrase node, or the DP node containing the precedent, doesn't C command the pronoun node containing himself, because the sister of the DP node is the P node of, and himself is clearly not a constituent of the preposition of. Okay, the preposition node of. And himself is clearly not a constituent of the preposition of. Since there is no other appropriate antecedent for himself within the sentence example, although the noun phrase supporters of the precedent sees commands himself, it is not a suitable antecedent because it is a plural expression and himself requires a singular antecedent. The anaphor himself remains unbound in violation of the binding condition on anaphors. This is the reason why sentence B, supporters of the precedent may blame himself, is ungrammatical. Polarity items and anaphors here underlines the importance of the relation C command in syntax. It also provides further evidence for positing that sentences have a hierarchical constituent structure, because polarity condition and the binding condition are both characterized in structural terms. Now, this is the last part of my report, the bare phrase structure. So Andrew Radford used a system of category labels based on the bar notation. Within this framework, a sentence like "I will survive" has a structure below. So as you can see, I will survive. So the bar notation used in the illustration above suggests that there are three different levels of what does it mean projection? Types of expression. Three different levels: the heads, the intermediate projections, and the maximal projections. Heads, also called the tense auxiliary, will. Intermediate projections like the T-bar will survive, and maximal projections like the tense phrase I will survive. However, Chomsky argues that a system which posits three different types of category label for projections of a given head, H, or other words, H or H bar and HP violates the universal grammar principle called the inclusiveness condition, which specifies that no new information can be introduced in the course of the syntactic computation. The reason why the bar notation used in trees violates inclusiveness is as follows. When the word will is taken out of the lexicon, its lexical entries specifies that it has a set of properties which include the grammatical properties represented by the category label T. But the tree in the illustration tells us that when will is merged with its complement survive, the resulting string will survive belongs to the category T bar. In other words, it is an intermediate projection of will. Likewise, the tree also tells us that the larger string I will survive is a tense phrase. In other words, it is a maximal projection of will. But this information about intermediate and maximal projections is not part of the lexical entry for will, and hence has seemingly been added in the course of the syntactic computation. However, adding such information about projection levels violates the inclusiveness condition. So, one way of avoiding violation, according to him, one way of avoiding violation of inclusiveness is to remove all information about projection levels from trees and hence replace a tree by one like below, as you can see. So he actually revised it. What are revised trees is that will in our five are actions auxiliary will, and hence all are tense expressions. Information about projection levels is omitted because redundant, since it is predictable from the position of constituents within a given structure. Look at the position pi tree. We can will is the minute of will. It is this expressed by will. That will survive is in intermediate projection of will by virtue being neither this nor the just expression by will, and that I will survive is the maximal projection of will by virtue of expression by will. After all, the goal of them is to reduce theoretical apparatus to the minimum necessary. Now, to conclude, given that bare phrase structure is more of a leading idea than a fully developed theory, and that it has not been widely adopted in descriptive work, we shall continue to use traditional label trees and the bar notation to represent structure, category membership, and projection levels, because this remains the notation most widely used in contemporary work in syntax. So that's it. That is my report, and thank you for listening.